It's time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Property Podcast. It is episode 105. Thank you for joining us. As always, I'm Rob B. As always, with me is Rob D. Good morning, Rob.
Good morning. Yep, we are here once again. We're here. We're caffeinated. We've got a heck of an episode. We've got politics. We've got a massive announcement. We've got fixing a crisis. We've got links to free stuff. There's a lot to pack in, so we better get on with it.
The force is strong in you today, Rob. Are you close?
I am.
You better be. We're doing a summit tomorrow.
I am. I am in the country. I'm back in London. So on the day that we're recording this, we've got the summit and the Property Hub meetup tomorrow, which is what I'm here for. And I'm super excited.
Well, we thank you for flying in to honour us with your presence, Rob. We do appreciate it. Braving this terrible weather in the UK to join us at the Property Hub. That may not sound sincere, but I promise you the rest of what we have is. And something that we are very proud to talk about and very happy to talk about and infused is our huge announcement that we told you all about last week, but actually told you nothing at all. This week, we can tell you what our massive project is for this year. Go on, Rob. Tell us what it is.
Oh, thanks. So the big announcement is we are publishing a magazine. Yes, an actual magazine made of paper, which comes through your door and lands on your doormat and you read it. I know this sounds like we're announcing it in 1990, but no, we are announcing it today. And there's a very good reason for it. The reason is twofold. It means that we get to reach a whole new audience who are not like the kind of people who listen to the podcast, like you smart people. But also, it means that we can bring you a whole load of content that we can't in any other way. So there's a certain type of article that we can bring you on the blog. There's a certain type of material we can bring you on the podcast. But there's also the kind of slightly more in-depth, longer form stuff that's really only suited to a magazine. Because then you've got a book, which is suitable for kind of detailed kind of stuff, but then books go out of date. A magazine means that we can bring you really useful, up-to-the-minute, in-depth stuff on a regular basis that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. And we're not doing this ourselves. We've drafted in a team of the very best writers to do this with us. And it's really going to be spectacular.
It really is. As Rob said, we've hired a team for this. It's not a side project for Rob and I. This is huge. It's been the most time-consuming thing we've probably ever done in terms of the amount of hours we've hired to do it other than running our businesses themselves. It's massive, and I just can't believe we're producing a magazine. It's so exciting, and the caliber of writers we're hiring are top notch. We're not hiring the cheapest, we're hiring the best. So, and plus we've got the wonderful Rob D writing too. So with all that combined, it's going to be an incredible magazine. And we're not that far away from the very first issue. We're not at all. The magazine will be quarterly. So 4 magazines, 4 really high quality magazines each year, and they can be delivered to your doorstep if you want to get in. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to have a launch offer, and we don't know how long this will last, but you want to take advantage of it as soon as you can because this price includes delivery. So you can have this magazine delivered to your doorstep every quarter for only £20 a year. Not a quarter, a year. Only £20 a year, and you'll get this delivered to you every quarter, full of information, full of detailed articles on the property market, where it's going, what's happening, news, reviews. It's going to have it all. It's going to be absolutely brilliant. I'm confident it's going to be the best thing we've ever done property-wise. That beats best-selling books, a massive forum, the Property Podcast. If I'm saying that, then you really start to understand the bar and the level we're setting ourselves. So if you're interested, what do you do?
Well, all you do is you go to thepropertyhub.net/magazine. Couldn't be much easier than that. And that'll give you all the information you need. And what you can do is you can sign up there, and it's all linked to your Property Hub account. so you can manage everything from one place. And it also means that once you've subscribed, you can read all the back issues. So as time goes on, thrown in for free as part of the deal, you're going to get digital versions of all the back issues that you can read online. So as time goes on, you're going to be building up a heck of a library of information, because every quarter there's going to be case studies. There's going to be features about things like tax and financing and lettings. There's going to be a location focus every quarter where we look at the investment case for a different part of the UK. All this kind of stuff that is really the only format that we can do it in. And you're going to have access to that as soon as it happens. Then you're also going to have access to it online for as long as you want, so you don't have to keep a stack of them under your bed or anything like that. So the propertyhub.net/magazine is the place to go. And I know we've said this before, but we would really, really appreciate your support with this. We asked for your support with the book, and you made the book what it was, and then you turned it into a bestseller. And with this, we would really love your support, both in signing up and in spreading the word to anyone who's interested in property, but maybe not a listener, because this is taking up a lot of time. It's costing us a lot of money, and we'd really love as many people to see it as possible. Please do go and sign up now. The first issue is going to be hitting your doormat on the 1st of May. And so that means that you've got till a couple of weeks before that to get signed up, so it goes out in time. But please don't wait until the last minute. Go and sign up now if you're interested, because it really is going to be something quite special.
£20 in property investment. £20 is nothing at all. You know, you think about how much you spend on mortgage fees alone. You know, the amount you're going to learn from each episode is incredible. It's a £5 an episode delivered. It's brilliant value. And it's not a pamphlet. It's a proper magazine. As I said, we've hired a team of people to build this, to deliver this. And if you're not happy, we'll give you your money back. You know, that's how confident we are. If you're not happy, we will return your money, your subscription, because we only want you to be delighted with what we do. You know, we put our heart and soul into every launch we do, you know, the podcast, the hub, the books. You know, we really put a lot of effort in because we want you to enjoy it. We want you to think, yeah, that's high quality. That's a really good product. And we feel very passionate about the same about the magazine. So we're not going to say any more now other than go and sign up, thepropertyhub.net/magazine. And if you haven't already, go and sign up.
Okay, so that's our news. There is other news happening in the world, and this week the news believe it or not, but this week the news we're talking about is from the good old Telegraph. And what they've done is they've collated all the housing policies of the different political parties. It's quite useful because you'll hear all these things on the radio or whatever. You'll have a different politician talking about what they're going to do for housing. Some of it sounds totally nuts. Some of it sounds a bit scary. Some of it sounds like it's never going to happen. Maybe some of it's good, I was about to say, but I don't know if it does. And it's all here in one useful place. So I don't know about you, but when I'm thinking about who to vote for, their policies on housing are really important to me, because it's important to me as a landlord, and it's important to me as someone who cares about the country, because housing is probably the biggest issue we face at the moment. And so it's a really useful place to go and get caught up on everything in one go.
I'm just looking at rent cap and who's putting rent caps on. So I can see where my vote isn't going, but there's 3 parties that are saying no to rent caps. So I'll have a look at those 3.
The link to that story is going to be in the show notes as ever. And the show notes for this week are at thepropertyhub.net/housing crisis 2015. So that links us in to our main topic this week, which is how do we fix the UK's housing crisis? And what we've done is we've based this episode on an article by monevator.com, which we'll link to in the show notes. It's a fantastic blog, Monevator. I've been recommending it for years, reading it for years, mainly about stock market investing, but touches on other things as well. And what I like about Monevator is that, first of all, the guy who writes it was kind enough to mention our book a few weeks back, so thank you for that. But also, he's very fair in his comments about property investors. A lot of people who don't invest in property but invest in other things are really down on investors and talk about how buy-to-let is the cause of everyone's ills. But he's not. He's entirely fair about it and talks about how buy-to-let has improved the quality of rental stock. And what he's done in this article is he's come up with 9 ideas to fix the UK's housing crisis. We're going to go through each of them and see what we think of them. We're obviously not going to agree with them all, but we're going to see what we think, and then we're going to see what we can come up with at the end as well. So, Rob, why don't you kick us off?
So, number 1, new saving tax breaks for would-be first-time buyers. So, here's the idea. First-time buyers would need more help to compete for properties with landlords who can buy with an interest-only mortgage and set their rental income against it. For starters, I'd look at rewarding young savers. I'd create a first-time buyer bonds that, say, pay 4% interest, tax-free, to enable first-time buyers to more easily build up for a deposit for their first home. Sure, why not? I don't see any fault with this. And I think the point about the interest only is really interesting. I truly believe that interest only mortgages should exist. For anybody under 40, if you're going for an interest only mortgage, if you're 40 years old and you take out an interest only mortgage and you have a 25-year product, then you're going to be 65 when you're still working when that product expires. And most people who buy their first home, it isn't their last home. So when you look at first-time buyers, when they buy that home, it's highly unlikely that they're going to live in that for the rest of their lives. Let's say maybe 5 years. So what's the point in a capital and repayment mortgage? The amount of capital they'll actually pay off during those 5 years will be minimal, but the hardship of making those extra payments is really tough. So I'd actually spin this, and I wouldn't give the tax break, but what I'd actually do is bring back interest-only mortgages for first-time buyers. Yes, I like the idea, but I think it can go further.
Interesting. Okay, so that's helping out first-time buyers. But then here's one which could be seen as an attack on landlords. Buy-to-let rental income no longer allowed to be offset against mortgage interest. And what he says is that at a stroke, this move would render much buy-to-let landlording unprofitable at current prices. It would probably cause a house price crash at the lower end of the market in the southeast. And then he goes on to say that most people would agree it's fairer, that most people get to own their own home rather than a smaller number of people owning 5 or 6. Would this really make such a big difference? I'm not sure. I don't think it would make landlording unprofitable necessarily. Maybe I'm missing something, but this seems to be to do with rental profits, right? So it's what you can offset against your profit. And the argument is that both in this article and we've heard it elsewhere, that in the southeast, landlords are hardly actually making any profit. They're basically making nothing or having to subsidize the properties while they hang on for the capital growth. And this idea doesn't really have anything to do with that. It's all to do with the profit rather than the fact that people are just speculating and hanging on for the capital growth. So I don't think that this really gets to the issue. And also, as a portfolio landlord who's actively acquiring, it's not hard to accumulate big losses in one year that you can carry forward anyway. So I know that landlords and investors are very much against not being able to offset their interest anyway, because it's like, well, you consider this a business in some areas of legislation when you want it to be one, and you consider it not a business and take away the advantage that the business has in another area. But quite aside from that, I just don't think it'll make a big difference.
Okay, so number 3, tax breaks for investment in new property developments. So in this point, Motivator says, of course, encouraging supply would help too. I happen to believe that the problem lies with more planning regulation and lack of appetite among builders. But nevertheless, if house building was made more attractive, then perhaps more smart people would find a way of getting around the problem. Yes, I agree that tax breaks may help, but I think the main point is, as he said in the blog, is it's planning and regulation. The amount of cost, time and effort to get a development off the ground is huge. And something that's been relaxed and that's been a big success is when the government made it a lot easier for converting office residential blocks into property. That a lot of that has been going on, an awful lot. And that's made a difference. Now, if that was relaxed more generally, openly across the board, I think we'd have a huge increase in supply, because what would happen is a lot of these small to medium-sized builders would start entering the market rather than just the big builders dominating. So I think it's a good point. And again, I would go further.
Okay, number 4, incentivize local communities to find and approve new infill and brownfield sites. The idea basically is giving local people cash payments when new homes go up in their area. And the idea is that this would reduce opposition to developments. And I don't know, frankly, if this would work, if it's practical. I haven't really thought it through, but I do agree that this is a problem to an extent, like NIMBYism in general. Everyone wants new houses, no one wants them near them. No one wants the car park opposite their house to be turned into 6 flats, but no one wants you to go and bulldoze the woodland on the green belt at the edge of the town and build houses there. It is an issue. If you can incentivize people, then fantastic. Whether it would work or not, I don't know, but it is something that's worth looking at because houses do need to go somewhere.
Number 5, a wealth tax on second homes. So the idea here is there would be a tax on second homes. for people who own them, but not holiday lets. So if you let them out, say 50% of the year, the article says there wouldn't be a tax. But if you just own another place, you don't let it out and you use it for 6 weekends a year and maybe a couple of weeks in the summer, then there should be a tax on that. This is more political than effective. I don't really think this would have much effect on the market at all. I think it would be popular and it'd be a nice policy for a government to bring out to show they're trying to do something. But the amount of tax it would raise and the effectiveness of the policy, I think, would be minimal. One of the big things we've got is in London, overseas buyers are buying their technically first home in London, but never using it and leaving it empty for the majority of the year. That's a much bigger problem than people who live in this country who buy a second home on the coast. And, I don't have a second home on the coast, so I'm not saying this in any biased way. I mean, it's a much bigger problem and one that needs tackling first before, say, the second homes. I think it'd be more political grandstanding than anything really effective.
Agreed. Okay, number 6, make London taller. All this moaning about skyscrapers in London is ridiculous, he says. London is too flat as it is. The key is to plan it in right from the start and make higher-rise living aspirational. I've got no particular objection to that, but I don't particularly think that packing more people into London is the answer. Like, London is busy, and the thing that I always notice when I come back to London from being away, I spend a couple of days just being shocked at how many people there are everywhere. And that goes for coming from any city other than New York, really. London is busy, and that means that there's a lot of pressure on public services and on transport. It's not just a case of, London's projected to grow by a couple of million within the next 5 years. And the problem wouldn't be solved if you could just whack up skyscrapers and have 1 million new houses. There would still be an issue because all of the problems that you've got with public services and with crowding would just become worse. So I don't think that just packing more people into London is really going to be a long-term solution. And this is something we're going to see echoed in points a little bit later on.
We will indeed. So we can go easy on that one because there's a good point to come. But another point, and I think this is actually a good one, is make London bigger. So not necessarily taller, but bigger. So the point is made that there's lots of greenbelt land surrounding London. And London's just too bloated. And a few tactical excursions here and there could actually unlock value in lots of current rubbish brownfield urban areas on the fringes. I think that's fair. I don't think it'll solve the problem, but I think it would ease the problem temporarily. And that's not a bad thing because even easing it helps. So yes, in certain areas, because some of the greenbelt is very nice and some of it is pretty awful. I don't understand why it's greenbelt. I live close to that greenbelt. I live just outside the M25 and some of it is absolutely beautiful. And then some of it you think, why aren't they building there? So yes, I think in the right places that could make a difference. See, I'm not that much of a NIMBY, Rob.
No, you don't. You clearly do not need a cash payment to incentivise you to have houses there. I'll take it instead. Number 8, if not inheritance tax or capital gains tax, then a rebatable property transfer tax on all home sales. So it's a bit of a detailed point, which I won't go into in depth here, but essentially, the author supports a very high inheritance tax. So the idea is that you, rather than taxing productive workers, you move the tax on to people at the end of their lives when they don't need it anymore and their children can just fend for themselves. I'm biased against this idea because I disagree with inheritance tax unless the threshold is moved way, way higher. So I am biased against the idea, which probably nothing to do with the idea itself, but I still don't think this really solves anything. I think that, again, like we talked about earlier, this would be a nice political move for a certain party to make. But I don't think this is the big issue. The big issue is coming up now.
It is, but I want to add to that, Rob. I'm equally passionate about that. Out of all the ideas, that's the one I like the least. And I think it wouldn't be effective either. Because I think if you work hard all your life, the most important thing to most people is their children or their loved ones. So if you're working hard, it's not normally for selfish reasons. It's because you want to do something else, give to someone else. And in often cases, that's family. So I think that's unfair to punish people who want to support and give to their families and make sure they're comfortable. It's not meaning they've got butlers and, Ferraris outside on their drive. I'm not saying no inheritance tax. But even at the level it is, I think it's unfair. So, yeah, I'm with you on that one, Rob. But as you say, the big point, number 9, and this is the one we both are passionate about and really think should happen sooner rather than later, and no political party is doing enough on this one. Revamp the North. Really revamp the North. So in the article, he says he's spoken about London, and we need this is his words. He said, we're talking about London, and we need a true second city. He says, let's not pretend Birmingham is one. He said that, not me. He then goes on to say, one of the best ideas I've heard in a long while is to join Liverpool, Leeds and Manchester together via fast trains and create a new mega city in the north. Yes, why has this not been done? Yes, I am biased, but I promise you this would make such a difference to our economy if those cities were linked up. It takes an hour to get to Liverpool to Manchester and nearly 2 hours to get to Liverpool to Leeds. Yeah, you can get from Manchester, Leeds to Liverpool to London in 2 hours. And the difference is far, far further. Why? Because it seems all the transport links are London focused. And yes, you could go, well, London is the most important city in the country. It is, but only because we make it so. If we had Liverpool, Leeds and Manchester all linked by super fast trains, which would be connected in under half an hour to each one. So instead of being 2 hours between the furthest points, it'd be under an hour. That would make a massive difference. If you're from London, you've only lived in London, and I know some people would explode if they ever went outside the M25. I've met lots of you, and you admit this yourselves. I promise you, this would make such a positive, important impact to our country to offer an alternative to London in such a good way. It almost makes me want to get into politics to help push it through, because I'm so passionate about this point. I really, truly believe that it's been neglected for far too long and it needs sorting out.
Yeah, and I think the fact that politicians and journalists, for the most part, don't leave the M25 doesn't really help. I was really disturbed the other day because I read something by Shelter that I agreed with, which was that there was I think it was Shelter, but there was some kind of suggestion that Parliament should be moved outside of London to the north for at least a term. And I thought, actually, I'd go for that, because I think it'd be really helpful politically if politicians and journalists actually spent some time in the rest of the country and realised the opportunities and the challenges. And everything being so London-centric means that you get policies like, oh, let's see if we can squeeze in an extra few houses in London. There's great things happening in the rest of the country, and most other European countries don't just have one megacity, which is the sole focus of their economic activity. They've got multiple ones. I think you can tell the idea that we like from this batch. We would say that hitting buy-to-let investors probably isn't the answer, but just none of those policies, those suggestions really seem like they're going to make that much of a difference to me. And an owner-occupier should be able to outbid an investor, really, because they can get a 90 to 95% mortgage and they don't need to make a certain return. So you'll often find that as investors, you're getting outbid by first-time buyers because they don't need to have the financial discipline. The policies that have been suggested for London, and what would really shake out all the investors in London, is a crash in values, because so much of it is driven by speculation rather than fundamentals. So maybe the market will just sort it out and we don't have to worry about any of this stuff. Or maybe the market will sort it out in a different way, and London will just keep getting busier and more expensive and more unpleasant until everyone moves somewhere else anyway. But it seems to me that the whole country is too reliant on London and we don't build enough houses. And if we don't address those two things, everything else is just going to be fiddling around the edges. Do we have any better ideas? I can't speak for you, Rob, but I don't. I think the solution is obvious, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. And I think that really the next government should be willing to make this their number one priority, commit to doing something massive and commit to taking action which could be quite unpopular in the short term, because it's the only way it's going to get fixed. Otherwise, you're just kind of fiddling around, sort of doing a little bit here, a little bit there. Are they going to do it? If it's politically unpopular, I'd say no.
No, they're not. That's the rubbish thing about politics. It's shortism. It's everybody looks at the short term. They go, okay, what's going to win us votes this term? That's the real problem with politics. We're going deep here. I'll end on this. I do agree with some of the posts, and the 2 points I think are relaxed planning, at least temporarily, to get more homes built and encourage people to start building homes. And secondly, offer that alternative to London. Now, some people will go, that's never going to happen. But I really believe that Leeds and Manchester and Liverpool are strong cities. They'll certainly become strong cities in their own right. If they were connected, that would make a true difference. And I could go into a lot more detail on examples of how we are over-reliant on London, but we only have so much time. Maybe that's another episode, but it wouldn't be so much on property. It'd be more a topic of discussion just in general about how, as a country, we are far too over-reliant on London. And yes, I live here, and yes, my business is here, and that's because I have to be. And that probably says enough for you to start thinking about some of the problems we have. But before we go too deep, Rob, let's move on to something a little bit more lighthearted and our resource of the week.
Yeah, let's do that. So we've had quite an intense episode with a lot of property. This resource of the week is nothing to do with property, but it's something that I discovered the other day and I couldn't believe that I hadn't heard of it before. It's Gutenberg.org. I'll link to it in the show notes so we don't have to worry about the spelling of it. But essentially what it is with books, after a certain number of years, I can't remember how many years it is, the copyright lapses and the book goes into the public domain. And Gutenberg.org has a list of, I think it's about 40,000 books that are in the public domain and that you can download absolutely free. So this includes everything by Jane Austen, by Charles Dickens, Oscar Wilde, and absolutely loads more. So if you're into your books and you're into classic literature, rather than having to buy it, you can just go to this website and pick up about 40,000 for free. It's also got in there the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, which is something we've talked about before, and I'm sure loads of other things as well. Something well worth checking out if you're into your books, Gutenberg.org.
And it's got audiobooks as well, if you like your audiobooks.
I didn't know that. Even more reason to check it out.
There you go, Rob. That 1 minute of research paid off. All right. Now to our iTunes reviews. Thank you so much to everyone who supports us. And thank you to actually everyone who supports the book. I don't know if we mentioned, but we've gone through over 100 reviews already. That's just incredible. And the vast majority are 5-star reviews with a sprinkling of 4-star. And we can't complain with that. That is absolutely brilliant. So thank you to everyone who supports the book and who supports the podcast. And this week's review for the podcast comes from Rick Crane. And Rick says, great stuff. I've been listening to the podcast pretty much from the start, and I'm only just getting round to leaving a much-deserved 5-star review and thanking you for all your work. Apologies it's taken so long. Great stuff. Can't recommend it enough for anyone interested in residential property investment. The same goes for Rob D's book, Beyond the Bricks. Inspiring stuff. Boom. That's his boom, not mine. But I can add a boom as well if you want. Boom. There you go. Quite similar.
Boom indeed. Thank you so much. We absolutely love those reviews. And we love putting together podcasts. We'd be doing it even if you didn't leave reviews, but do leave reviews anyway. But I've really enjoyed this week's discussion, and we've got another really interesting one coming up next week. Crowdfunding, the future of property investment. So this is something we touched on in a recent episode, and we're going to dedicate a whole one to it because there are more and more news stories about crowdfunding and property. And it's something that we're getting asked about a fair bit. And so we want to give a whole episode over to the pros and the cons and whether it really is the future of property investment.
We do. That should make a really interesting episode. A few people have requested us to do that one. So make sure you tune in. If you don't understand what crowdfunding is, then you absolutely need to be tuning in to find out what it is and can you take advantage of it. Right, okay, before we sign off, we have to mention magazine one last time. Go to thepropertyhub.net/magazine and get your subscription now. I can't say any more. It'll be the best £20 you've ever spent in property, I promise you. That's 4 issues, that's not one. And that's delivered, no postage on top, no tax on top. Just £20 for 4 brilliant magazines delivered to you through your front door once a quarter. We can't say fairer than that. And if you don't like it, we'll give you your money back. So it's absolutely no risk. So go to thepropertyhub.net/magazine where you can pick up your subscription for only £20.
Yes, please do. So go do that. We'll go prepare next week's episode and we'll see you back here next Thursday morning for the Property Podcast. But until then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.